Yes, and I never said that at the time, but yes, they're a combination of titanium and depleted uranium, titanium shell with the depleted uranium interior, and guided by GPS. And I never revealed those details at the time, but a couple of years later, I was debating one of the General Abramson's colonels in the Strategic Defense Initiative organization, and I started talking about the pure offensive purposes of Star Wars weapons. And in his rebuttal, he said, "Now, you know very well that those titanium cones fired at the Earth from space and directed by GPS, that program doesn't exist." And he said, well, I said, well, that's interesting because you just revealed classified details that I've never talked about and certainly didn't mention in my talk. So obviously the program does exist. And so since then, I've been able to tell more details.
Now, when we talked, you said you're also allowed to reveal that it's robotic space planes, and you've been out of this for a long time, but yep. I mean, from when I've talked to people at NASA here in Texas, people who were on the original Apollo program and beyond, and some of them we've had on air, and these are guys you can watch the NASA film footage, and there they are on mission control. They say that more than 90% of NASA, which is run by the Pentagon and by the president, is military, and that basically Wernher von Braun drew up the space shuttle in the 30s. It's a 1960s, 70s, 80s technology, and that the space program we see is really a facade for a larger black op system, and that the militarization of space is just off the charts right now. And I mean, what can you speak to along those lines?
Right. Well, space has been militarized for a very long time. Most of the stuff up there are military satellites of one kind or another, either reconnaissance satellites or military communications satellites and various other things. The weapons themselves may not be up there, but the gun sights are up there and all the rest of it. So the whole military command and control system is space-based. So my task really, when Reagan was trying to do all this stuff, was not to keep space from being militarized, as it already was, but to keep it from being weaponized, because that's the line we simply did not want to cross. We understood that when we put weapons in space, that, and particularly if they were the kind of stuff like Star Wars weapons with the kind of offensive capabilities they represented, that the Soviet Union would have no choice but to start shooting them down as fast as we put them up. And, of course, that was a task that was fairly simple. These space-based weapons are extremely vulnerable. After all, they follow fixed orbits, so you always know in advance exactly where they're going to be at any given time. The mirrors that we were designing could be destroyed by such exotic anti-satellite weapons as a bucket of sand or a thimbleful of sewing machine oil. So I always told the government, look, these things are never going to have any defensive value because of their enormous vulnerability. They will be totally useless to an innocent party sitting back trying to defend himself, because all the opposing side will do will be to knock out critical elements in the system first and then launch their missiles. And even if you made these things so that they could, in fact, shoot down ballistic missiles, which they couldn't do at that time, they would be useless because they'd be put out of operation before the missiles were fired. And I thought that was a pretty good argument. I also pointed out that having these Star Wars weapons on both sides is the ultimate military lunacy, because it rewards whoever shoots first. And what we had at that point in the 70s was a stable nuclear balance, because whoever fired first lost the war. And the new technology changed that.
All right, Doctor, let's go back. And we got plenty of time to continue, but while we've got you, I want to go back.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the robotic space planes?
Not very much. I mean, if you take a design roughly based on the shuttle and you eliminate all the people from it and all the life support systems and all the oxygen and all the food and all the piss tubes and all of that kind of stuff, and make it robotic with some computers more advanced than the 1960s, you can make the thing a heck of a lot smaller and make it perform a heck of a lot better for a lot less money.
So you can only hypothetically talk to us about what's going on because that's classified.
Right.
Well, now NASA admits they have been developing space planes, and the Pentagon admits, just like the B-1 bomber, the B-2 bomber were secret for many, many years, with the stealth bomber for 20 years before they rolled it out. I mean, can you talk about how big the military NASA is versus the public NASA?
Shorter answer to that is I don't know anymore, because all of my people on the inside that I used to get fed all the information from, all my old ex-students and people who used to work for me that used to cue me in, they've all died or retired and disappeared. So I really don't have recent information.
All right, Doc, stay there. We're going to talk about X-ray lasers and more when we get back on the other side of this break. Stay with us. Dr. Bob Bowman is our guest. We appreciate him joining us today. We're going to open the phones up for Dr. Bob Bowman coming up in the next half hour. The toll-free number to join us is 1-800-259-9231. You can call in about 9/11 Truth, about Star Wars program, about the attack on Iran, whatever you wish to ask Dr. Bowman, 1-800-259-9231. Doc, I was interrupting you as we went to break, bringing up X-ray lasers, other weapon systems, and you said you can speak to X-ray lasers. The way I saw the news describe them, one system is a nuke detonates, and there's these rods in space. That sounds pretty dangerous to the rest of the satellites and things, and then fires a just incredibly high-powered array of beams through it, destroying the weapon system in the process. I mean, is that one facet of X-ray lasers?
Yes. That is the original design of Edward Teller in the early 1970s. And he worked on it. There were several underground nuclear blasts that were designed to test this, to see if they could actually get a X-ray laser to work when pumped by a nuclear explosion. And they never were able to get it to work. And I lectured on this extensively in the early 1980s when Teller was still pushing it and had gone public with it. And it is really a crazy Rube Goldberg scheme, and is supposed to pump these beams of X-rays out these tubes in the tiny fraction of a second before the whole thing evaporates because of the nuclear explosion. And those beams of X-rays have to be extremely accurately pointed, because they have to be pointed at where the ballistic missiles will be when the X-ray beam gets there. And from hundreds or perhaps even thousands of miles away. So we're never able to get the pointing of those long, wimpy rods accurate enough to do any good. We were never able to get the X-rays to actually laze. There were a whole raft of things that were just totally ridiculous. And the early SDI program just threw that whole system away completely because it was so ludicrous.
What about neutron bombs from space?